there's just a naked, obvious sense of greed from one person who's got a long line of a history of doing things that people just don't like.
Can you even imagine a World Cup without, Spain, Germany, England? I mean, all these great European teams.
Not one that's credible or going to be of the quality that I think most football fans would want to take part in.
It's done and dusted, isn't it? I mean, there's no way he can resurrect this thing.
I don't think we can put the final nail in the coffin on this project just yet.
Can Gianni Infantino survive this?
I think he can survive.
Really?
I do.
Hello and welcome to the Fourcast. I'm Matt Frei. Football's a funny old game, isn't it? Just weeks ago, Gianni Infantino looked set for a fourth term as president of FIFA. Now, though, his job looks increasingly in peril. From cozying up to world leaders, sky-high ticket prices, and even overturning red card suspensions, accusations of cronyism and corruption have never been far behind him. But after announcing plans to sell off part of the World Cup to private investors, it seems that Infantino may have finally bitten off more than even he can chew. With the football federations in Europe, North America and now Asia all rejecting it, his plan appears dead in the water. And with the resignation of one of his senior advisors, Infantino's position is looking rather uncertain. Even the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, now says he should go. So has Infantino badly misread the situation? Has he misread the room? Will he be forced out of his job? And who could replace him? Joining me to discuss all of this is our sports reporter, Jarrett-Bryan, as well as Abiola Ijasanmi, the former chief operating officer from the Confederation of African Football, CAF. Welcome to you both. One hell of a scandal that suddenly broke. Let's just talk first of all about how this thing broke. Because if the Times sports journalist Martin Ziegler hadn't written about it, hadn't uncovered the story, would we even know about it?
There's a high chance that we wouldn't, because Martin's one of the best sports journalists in the business. He's got a reputation for breaking stories of this size. He's a brilliant story getter. But no, there's a very high chance that had he not broken this, we wouldn't have known about this. That, I think, is the bigger frustration for Gianni Infantino. Not so much that people don't like the idea, it's that he didn't get a chance to kind of get it down the line further before he had less time to then, well, it's too late now, it's been done. I think that's the bigger frustration for him.
The head of UEFA today, and UEFA has been incredibly strong in statements about this, and of course yesterday they said they would boycott the World Cup if this wasn't ditched. The head of UEFA today called the people behind it, including Gianni Infantino, snakes and liars. I mean, again, very strong language. Is that because it was all kept secret?
I would imagine so. That is, as you say, it's pretty strong language. But I've seen the presentation that was put forward to the member associations, and it does appear that it's been a long time in the making. And that, as you say, this is just the last part of it. And he's
what exactly was a long time in the making? The idea of hiving off some of the
I believe so. Yeah, absolutely. The idea of actually having a new entity for the competition and the events and the commercial piece.
So why didn't it leak out earlier?
It's a really good question. I can't answer that one actually, but it does feel that it's not just a 2 week in the making type thing. It's been brewing for quite a while. It's quite a detailed report in some respects. In others, it's quite a marketing presentation as opposed to a true investment report. And
it might be as simple as there were so many big stories during the World Cup that might have consumed everyone's attention.
And we were watching the football.
And the football as well.
Yeah, so let's not forget the football.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think look, money in football, and we'll talk about this later, are not exactly strange bedfellows. If someone else had suggested this, if you, Jordan, had come up with this idea that actually there needs to be money generated by the most popular sporting tournament on the planet, there are member associations that don't have a lot of money, especially in Africa. You used to work for that organization. This is fair dues. If that had been suggested as a model, would that have been fine? Or is Gianni Infantino, with all his controversy around him, is he the problem here?
I think it still would have been a problem. I think the idea that an entity like FIFA that's supposed to be not-for-profit can now start making money, I think doesn't sit well with most people. So you're kind of almost going against your own, the ethos of what your entity is about. So I think people have an issue with it in that sense. I also think that Infantino's reputation isn't great. So because it's come from him, if it came from me, people like me generally. So so I'm told. So I'm told, Matt.
Yeah.
So I'm told. They may still not like the idea,
Yeah.
but I might get at least people's attention to kind of let me explain this. Whereas because it's come from Gianni Infantino, who people don't like already, it's like, no, this just stinks of more of what we think about you already. So the idea of itself is one that's not liked, but it's not helped that it's come from a particular messenger.
We'll talk about the principle of making more money through FIFA, for its members associations in a minute. But first of all, the deal itself that he proposed. Is this now dead in the water, Abby?
I don't know whether it is dead in the water. I know from the African Confederation's perspective, they're meeting with their exco next week, and obviously not much has been said from that perspective.
Do you think they like the deal?
I think the investment that comes is well needed. And I think it's it's a little bit unfair, I think, that you're asking the poorest associations to kind of be the deciding vote on all of this in terms of their numbers. They're a very loyal fan base when it comes to FIFA, because obviously traditionally, historically, FIFA have provided them quite well financially in terms of infrastructure, development, etc. But I do believe that absolutely, the investment is welcome. It's really just a case of how and where that comes from.
So they may welcome the $20 million that Gianni Infantino promised each nation voting for his plan. The Europeans might well describe it as a bribe. What is it? Welcome necessary investment or a bribe?
Welcome necessary investment, but wrapped up in very poor governance, is how I would describe it. I think you'd mentioned earlier that had they been given a runway, had the consultation taken part before the presentation, perhaps, had they been part of that consultation, I think it would have landed much better. But it is, as it turns out, it seems to be that this is what we're going to do. Even the terminology in the report is "we are going" as opposed to "we would like."
Yeah.
And therefore, I think that's the point. But welcome investment for sure for most of the confederations.
What I don't understand is the argument from Infantino would be we want to generate more money for the game so we can help certain parts of the world to grow football in their particular regions. But FIFA generates billions already. So the counter argument is well, it's not like you don't have any money and you need to make more money to help these parts of the world. You have billions. So I don't understand why he thought this wouldn't get pushed back on the basis that we're trying to generate more money for these regions that need it, but we're sitting on billions already. So that doesn't make sense to me.
It might bring me to my next question, because there's a guy involved called Joshua Kushner. Recognize his surname? Brother of Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner's son-in-law of President Trump. Joshua Kushner has a company called Thrive Eternal, and they were going to be the lead investor in all this. So perhaps in the best spirit of Donald Trump, at the end of the day, it's about how much money you can make for yourself and your mates and your family or your family's mates. Maybe that's where this comes in. So tell us about Joshua Kushner, what his involvement would have been or still might be in all this, and how that came to pass.
Well, he would basically was going to, and if it still goes ahead, he would lead on this kind of third party siphoning off this money generated for particular other entities. He would lead on that. And you will know better than me, Matt, better than most people, Donald Trump is a businessman at heart. And anything that smacks of an opportunity to make money, Donald Trump is all over that. This is what he's always been about. So they see an opportunity off the back of what they would say the most successful World Cup since the last World Cup in the States, 1994. This is the chance to make even more money. And this is where I think Infantino's got it wrong, because I've spoken to a lot of football fans and they smell greed. They hear him talk about the money generated, more viewers, more teams, more. The World Cup was 11 days ago. And he hasn't even waited a little bit longer to let the dust settle before proposing an opportunity to make more money. It just seems like we've made lots of money. We're going to make even more money now. I think that is where he's crossed the line and gone too far.
And also, I think perhaps he's just being too impatient and has misread the room, because even though, we got upset about the hydration breaks, and, there was the issue with the red card, which was very dicey for him because Trump got involved. On the whole, correct me if I'm wrong, the impression that I got at the end of some pretty obsessive late night viewing and some incredible games, Forget about a bit of argy-bargy from the Argies at the end. But it was really an extraordinarily successful World Cup. They often tend to be, don't they? Because we get wrapped up in the whole, this excitement of the games themselves. So why spoil it?
Well, why spoil it? But I think even that narrative, that line that it was the most successful World Cup, for who?
Yeah.
I think we're going to judge the metric of how we're judging a good World Cup. If you're judging it on, money generated, stadiums full, two teams in the final that we might want to see, okay. If you ask the Iranians, was it a great World Cup? I bet they wouldn't say so. Yeah. If you ask people that are football purists about a red card being overturned, that was one of the most scandalous. They wouldn't say so.
Even then, as someone who's a bit of a football amateur, I'm very much a sort of seasonal fan. Every 4 years I get obsessed with it and I follow it and then I forget about it. I apologise. But I thought in the general spirit of things, despite all the kind of warts, it was an extraordinarily entertaining, compelling event that lasted for the better part of a month and distracted us from all the other stuff that's going on.
I describe it as the best worst World Cup. For me, it was the best worst World Cup because I think there were great things. Yeah. There was great stories. There were more African nations. Yeah. There were some good goals being scored. Right. The stars turned up. But I think
also real controversies. Yeah,
exactly.
So it's the worst part of it that's been teased out by Gianni Infantino. The bad stuff that we picked apart during the World Cup that he's now doubled down on with this deal.
I think it would appear so. As you say, I would agree that I think it's been commercially one of the best World Cups. But I think there has been some elements that, as you say, for those people that aren't happy with certain things, they've just seized that.
Let's talk about nuts and bolts of the vote then. So if this thing goes ahead, there will be a vote in the FIFA Assembly, the FIFA Parliament. I think it's 211 votes, is that right? Yes. Okay. And how many votes has he already lost? He's lost the 55 votes that belong to UEFA. He's lost the votes that belong to CONCACAF.
Which I believe is about 41. Yeah. I think it might be a little bit over half. Yeah. AFC are in there also.
Right.
From my understanding.
So he's lost the majority.
It would appear, I was going to say it would be losing. I think
right.
It's probably the best way. Yeah.
So, and it's a simple majority that decides. So he's lost the vote, essentially. It looks like it.
It looks like it. I don't want to predate that in terms of numbers.
But we think so. Yeah. But if that's the case, it's done and dusted, isn't it? I mean, there's no way he can resurrect this thing. Unless people change their mind.
There we go. And there's still some time till September the 19th. So therefore, I don't think we can put the final nail in the coffin on this project just yet.
But do the federations vote as a bloc, or can individual countries say, we're going to do our own thing here?
It depends on where you're talking, obviously. Across the continent of Africa, they tend to vote as a bloc. I would be surprised if this is anything different, but that's the way that things have tended to move.
So in theory, Abby, and I'm just saying in theory, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, if miraculously that $20 million as an entrance fee, as a thank you for voting for this great plan, suddenly were to become, 40 or 50, right? Then, and my people might be persuaded. In theory, you could still break down those blocks and get your majority.
Absolutely, Matt, you could. And that's why I say I wouldn't put anything past,
So that's a possibility. I'm not being lurid here. It's a possibility.
No, anything's possible. Absolutely.
It's football, right?
But there you go. It's football.
Who gets the money? The head of the federation?
Well, this is a really good question, isn't it? It goes to the federation. I would want to say the head of the federation. It goes to the federations. From what I can see, there doesn't seem to be any conditionality or any kind of stipulation as to where that money is spent and how it's spent. Is some allocated for specific infrastructure only? Are there other elements that you use for women's football?
And could infrastructure mean a garage extension or, whatever?
It could be. Nice little patio somewhere. Yeah. No. Absolutely. So, and these are the nuts and bolts that we don't know. And therefore, to vote on something like this without that kind of detail is, really precarious.
I think you're right to say that it's not dead yet, but I just don't understand how there could be a credible World Cup. And I know this affects the women's game, which is in the next kind of month or so. But if we jump ahead to the men's World Cup in 4 years' time, if you're Coca-Cola, if you're McDonald's, if you're Adidas, if you're Samsung, and you're told there's no England, there's no Portugal, there's no Spain, the holders, there's no Germany, you're not putting money into that World Cup, I'd imagine. So I don't see how this proposal can go through at this stage.
Can you even imagine a World Cup without, Spain? And, if Italy ever make it back in, Italy, Germany, England. I mean, all these great European teams.
Not one that's credible or going to be of the quality that I think most football fans would want to take part in. It could happen.
Have we been in this? Have we been in this position before, where the World Cup looked as if it might, where FIFA looked, was at war with itself?
I don't remember.
This is the most serious crisis,
I
right?
think it is, yeah.
The Super League was the other big crisis. That was 4 years ago. Yeah. Just remind us of what that was all about.
Well, that was the Premier League has become so powerful and so financially, so rich and vast. The other European leagues are looking at the Premier League thinking, well, we're getting squeezed out here. We've got to link up. We've got to come together for this Super League to challenge the might of the Premier League. What happened there with the controversy from here in England was that there were 6 clubs that were touted to be a part of that, and that went down really. That went down even worse than this proposal from.
Really?
That was Man United, Manchester City, Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea, and Liverpool. And those fans weren't having any of it. Eventually, the owners of the clubs heard, what the fans had to say, and they pulled out. I don't think that is dead in the water, by the way, but for now, that's not happening.
So basically, there's an example in the recent past of the instincts for making money, or greed, if you like, rubbing up against the kind of pure soul of the football fan. Fascinating.
It is, and I think it's ironic that we're kind of the horse has bolted in terms of money, muddying the waters of football, as you started by saying anyway. So this idea that if we take a stance now, the purity of the game will go back to what it was, we're well past that. I think what's happened here is there's just a naked, obvious sense of greed from one person who's got a long line of a history of doing things that people just don't like.
But forgive me, purity of the game, excuse me, the Premier League, I mean, it's all about money. The Emirates Stadium, you've got, princes of sand and oil piling into English football. I mean, what's pure about any of that?
I guess the difference would be the Premier League is a private entity that they're allowed to make money, whereas FIFA pride themselves on not being a financially gaining entity.
But that's a thin line, isn't it? And it was inevitable, Abby, that line would at some stage be crossed.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things that they will argue is that it has been done in other leagues. I think the difference with the World Cup is you are dealing with nations.
Yes.
When you're talking about the Premier League, you are dealing with clubs and individual fans, and I think that's fine. But as you rightly pointed out, it is a non-commercial entity that doesn't really belong to FIFA to break up in that way. So I think there are some really distinct differences. The governing, from what I understand, Matt, sorry, I just want to point this out, is that if they were to strip all of the commercials out, you've just got this then shell of a governing body. Yeah. Reading between the lines, it's like, okay, so where really does the control then sit? Yeah. So this is what the challenge is.
And what does FIFA actually own? I mean, when they say 20% of its assets will be privatized, what are its assets?
Well, competitions essentially is where it makes most of its money from. Sponsor, obviously, commercial brand partnerships and competitions. So it would be the competitions in all of the events, whatever they are, will be sitting in this new FFFE entity. Yeah. And they would be paying a license to the empty shell FIFA, essentially, which then becomes just the governing body. Okay. Competition, control and governance will remain with FIFA. But that's really difficult to say when you have investors that are, they want their return. They're going to have a control. They're not giving up this amount of money for nothing.
Okay, so what I don't understand, explain this to me. The big thing of football that makes money, as far as I know, is advertising and access, right? So media rights. If you can flog off 20% of the World Cup, for media rights, does that mean they have jurisdiction to sell off, 20 games or something privately, or they get 20% of the profits, or how does it work?
I don't know the details of how it would work, but those options you've labelled there are all on the table. They're all possibilities. And that's why I think, going back to the football fan, they think it stinks. And I think I spoke to someone today who mentioned that if this happens, this will be the start. If money making is now in your charter as an organisation, where does that end? So I think they've got to shut it down now before it gets to the point where making money becomes a priority before protecting the game. That's what FIFA's supposed to do.
Yeah, and I also think when you say money making, obviously that is their role in that respect. Profit, absolutely. It's about reinvesting that back in. And if that 20% is then being siphoned off 20% X because it's going to investors, that's not being reinvested back into the game. Yeah. So yeah.
But Mr. Kushner might get very rich as a result. Maybe some of his relatives, who shall remain nameless. Tell us about the figure of Carlos Cadera. So he was the key advisor to Gianni Infantino. He used to work for Goldman Sachs. He used to work for the White House. I think he was part of the key team that got the World Cup to the US. And he resigned today, and that was the big bombshell.
It was, and what I find interesting about that was it wasn't that he knew what was going on and thought, "No, I'm not. This is not good. I want out."
But he did say that. He said, "I knew nothing about this."
His line was that he didn't even know about it. So it wasn't a case of he knew about it and didn't like it. His line was, "I didn't even know about it."
Is that really plausible if he's his closest advisor?
Well,
It does seem like there's been a real structural bypass.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, a lot of the federations and the VPs don't seem to know anything.
Yeah.
So-
Anyway,
Which speaks more to
but you were saying,
Infantino.
I cut you off. You said it wasn't just that.
It was the fact that he wasn't even involved in any of this. How can you be the main advisor to somebody and a decision so big as this, you're not included, you're not informed, you're not told about it, or ask for your advice on this? And you know, he's jumped. I think that's a really big blow to Infantino, because I have the image of watching a David Attenborough program, and you know when you see the lion take a bite out of the gazelle, and the gazelle's not quite dead, but it's kind of like limping on. You're like, it's only a matter of time before it just goes down.
Yeah.
That, I think, is what is happening to Infantino here now. It feels like he's not done.
He's a wounded animal.
He's wounded.
I think
But
so.
is he fatally wounded?
I don't know about fatally. He's wounded, but I don't know about fatally.
Okay, so, you know, it's funny. One of the things that made me laugh in the last few days, and of course all this is deadly serious, but one of the things that did make me laugh is when Sepp Blatter came out of, almost immediately and said, "This stinks." So here's Sepp Blatter. It wasn't exactly the paragon of probity in world football.
I suppose it shows you how bad it's
Yeah,
got.
exactly. So it shows you how bad it is. I mean, what is it about that job that people end up, and often from Switzerland, nothing wrong with the Swiss, but, what's going on there? Abby?
It's the amount of money, I think, isn't it, Matt? Really, it's really straightforward. I think it's a very, it's a powerful role in the sense that you're almost unelected, even though you are elected.
Yes.
And I think the current administration have done really well at distributing funds to poorer MAs, member associations.
Under Gianni Infantino.
Yeah, absolutely. Since
so there's
2015.
good stuff as well that he's done.
There is good stuff, and that's
Right.
where the loyal base really comes from.
Right.
So, there's been a lot of infrastructure, not as much transparency, perhaps, as we could have had. I know that governance is a word that's spouted out very often when it comes to
And
FIFA.
who are his fans? Who are Gianni's fans?
Across Africa are very loyal, I
Right.
think, to FIFA in that respect,
How
because...
many votes is that? Sorry to be...
54.
Right, okay.
So just
you
under
mentioned that
UEFA.
earlier.
Can I
Yeah.
just ask, because he's spoken for years and years about growing the game across the African continent. Do the African federations, do they feel almost used, or do they, because they've benefited under his presidency for sure, as Matt's mentioned there, but is there a sense now they're thinking, hang on a minute, this was never about growing the game in Africa, this was about you growing your entity and your
pocket.
base, and possibly your pocket as well. Do they feel used, or is that not a sentiment that you're getting a sense of?
Not a sentiment that I ever got a sense of. I say very loyal in that respect. And he's elevated a lot of members to the FIFA Council, etc. So no, it's a very they're very happy with him currently, and just see this as additional investment in order to.
So are they upset? Is the African Federation upset with UEFA? And do they think this is just another example of football colonialism? That they're reading us the riot act. They think they rule the roost here. They might have started the game in the 19th century, but we're really, really good at it, and there are lots of us. And the future of football resides in Africa.
Oh, it absolutely does. I don't feel that they're resentful to FIFA in any way, or they're upset with UEFA.
Yeah.
But I do feel it's for them, they are seeing it from a very different picture.
Yeah.
And it's really going to be, nobody could blame the federations for wanting to accept that investment. So therefore, it really is just going to be a case of numbers.
So it's unfortunate. They need the investment. They want to make money out of it as well. They need the infrastructure. How unlucky are they that they've got Gianni Infantino either using them or being their spokesperson for that kind of development?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's an ongoing, it's not new in that respect. What's new, I think, are the sums that are being bandied around.
Yeah.
That is the big thing at the moment, is the amount and where that's going to go. And I think for me, I speak with investors all the time. This is what I do for a living with African Sports Investor. We essentially talk to investors, professionalize the women's game across the continent of Africa. So in that respect, investment is not only is it needed, it's welcomed, but there's got to be a lot of due diligence that's done around that, because what's not stable currently in most of the federations is the governance. Investors don't want to put their money where they don't know whether they're going to get it back.
Sure.
So therefore, there's a whole piece that's missing here in terms of how it's done. And also, this is not the only way that investment can come in, through the national leagues. That's how we do it. We work with federations individually to bring in investment through the national leagues.
I wonder if there's a silver lining in all this, which is that we're talking here right now about the need to invest more in African football. And we would not necessarily be doing that if it hadn't been for Gianni Infantino and his plan.
I couldn't agree more. I think this is the silver lining, because it's opened up the conversation. And I say I've been fortunate enough that for the last year, 18 months, I've been talking to federations about what this could look like. And it is invariably private equity, investors that are probably the level below that are interested. But at least now they can see that there are alternatives. If this doesn't go through, you're not home and dry.
But the peril for African football is that if the plan for some reason goes ahead and the World Cup splits, then people will point the finger and say, it was you lot were too greedy, you took the money from Gianni Infantino, you've now split the World Cup, and the world has changed.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's really sad, I think, if that were to be the position, because...
And you could say it's unfair, but that I think that's what the accusation would be.
It would be, but I think at this moment in time, for example, UEFA are voting as a bloc on this one, which doesn't normally happen.
No. Oh, really? It doesn't?
Not always, not as often as CAF does.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like quids in. There's one in it, but when I say one, obviously UEFA are 55 and the Confederation of African Football is 54. So on that level, I think the only shame would be is that they could see that this money could really help, and therefore they're going to lose out from the FIFA entity. But I say there are other ways of doing this.
Jordan, do you think that Europe are being they're throwing their weight around too much? The historical powerhouse of the game. There wouldn't be a World Cup without Spain and Italy. Don't mess with us.
No, I think they're looking at this, as you say, everyone, from their perspective. I think it's important that we look at the rest of the world looking at it from their perspective.
Yeah.
So Europe are thinking, this stinks, this is bad. Europe have always dominated the World Cup. If you look at the last 10 World Cup finals, I think there's only Brazil and Argentina that have been in any final. You look at all the World Cup finals in history, only two have not had a European nation in them. So Europe have always dominated the World Cup. But there might be an element of them thinking, we invented this game, we're big, bad Europe, we're great, we're amazing, do what we say. But they're looking at it from a position of, they don't think Infantino is the right man to govern this game because it doesn't work for them. The Africans are saying, well, actually, you can say that because of what you've got. It works for us. So I understand it from all points of view.
What I find so sad about all this is that if it does indeed blow things up, is that football is probably the only thing on this planet that is truly global, right? I mean, we've got plenty of wars going on. People disagree about all sorts of things. We disagreed about COVID and how to respond to it. We disagree about climate change. We're becoming more nationalist in our policies and our national politics around the world. But football
is the one thing.
you can travel around the world, and I was watching the World Cup in a tiny little village in Greece. Everyone was glued to the screen, and Greece wasn't playing, but it was everyone else, right?
Yes.
And I know it is extraordinary.
This will come to a head soon because of the deadline of the 19th. There's got to be a decision made. The women's games are at some point in September, I believe. So they need to decide if they're going to go through with this, and if so, if we wait for boycott, then that will trigger that.
But also the timeline is so quick. I mean, the 19th of September, just after the summer holidays.
Absolutely. It's, I say, not a great governance move at all.
Right, because he was trying to sneak it through?
I believe so, yeah. I think
but it would have become public anyway. What a dumb idea.
It would have been, but I think they probably would have got it so far down the line that, absolutely.
I think that's why genuinely he's
Can he
annoyed.
survive? Can Gianni Infantino survive this?
Let's see. The story
What's
goes
your betting?
on.
If you were a betting woman, where would you put
I
him?
think he can survive.
Really?
I do, yeah.
Because
probably I've witnessed across Africa the power that they feel for him in terms of, a loyal fan base. I feel that he will survive.
I predict that he won't resign, but he won't run again. So I think he'll say, look, I'm not going anywhere, but the elections are in March, I
Yes,
believe.
correct, yeah.
Just March, I won't run again. So let me see out till March, and then I'll walk away.
He
at the
might
back
be
door.
fine because apparently Trump's got a job sorted out for him, which is General Secretary of the United Nations. And also to be privatised.
Maybe we need to keep it FIFA.
Yes, maybe we do. Yes.
Okay,
Could be worse.
but just finally, biggest crisis in world football since when?
Ooh.
Ooh.
Easily, I've only been in football for the last 4 or 5 years. So
Okay.
in my lifetime,
your
my little
lifetime, in
lifetime.
your football time.
Absolutely, my football lifetime.
I think it's the biggest. I mean, you could talk about the mid-'80s and Russia's and USSR's involvement. I can't think of a bigger. If UEFA were to pull out, that's massive. That is really, really
Would
big.
there be two rival World Cups? You know, one European World
One
Cup.
European-
Well, the
yeah.
Americans
2
call
Euros.
the Americans call the World Series and call it the
This
World
is true,
Series
this is true.
in baseball, and it ain't the World Series.
This
So
is
it's not
true.
the world
Absolutely.
participating.
Yeah, no.
You just lose
it's,
credibility. I think if there's a World Cup without a particular region of the world, it can't be a World Cup. So I just think it can happen, but no one takes it seriously.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll,
yeah.
we'll leave it there. Jordan Jarrett-Bryan, Abiola Ijasanmi, thank you very much to both of you, and thanks to all of you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Forecast. Goodbye.